for knowledge. When people of long ago began observing animals, birds, trees, plants, etc., they started wondering how to make use of what all they saw around them. Whenever they saw the sharp and strong teeth of the tiger or powerful claws of the bear, they felt very envious. They began to think, if they could have these powerful weapons, what life will be like? Or better still, if they could somehow make these powerful claws or teeth like that of a tiger. Keeping this very thought in mind, they let their imagination run, and finally they discovered the way to make a knife from a sharp piece of stone and fixed it up on a strong stick. The result was a big and strong javelin. So now they felt a little satisfied that they too had the sharp tooth and the longest claw. And when these sharp few pieces of stones were fitted onto a stick, the very first saw appeared. Now they felt they were very well equipped to make their life better and easy. But of course later people learned to make all these saws and knives out of sturdy metal which we still use in our daily life.
Mother Nature teaches us a lot. The only thing to be kept in mind is to be curious and to be observant.
You must have seen in spring, the trees are dressed in green. But in autumn, the leaves changes color and start to fall. But if you watch carefully, some curled up leaves don't fall off easily. Even the strong wind can't get them. Now when a curious man saw such a leaf, he thought, how can he use this information for the benefit of mankind? Hence he thought, if he could construct a bridge that looked like a rolled up leaf, it will be great. Once again, the horses of imagination ran fast, and the first ever attempt to make a bridge was made. And it did prove to be not only successful but a very strong one too.
Further, when another curious man saw a web, strong and pretty, come what may, nothing happens to the web. It goes on swinging back and forth, bending, rocking but never falling apart. Once again, the idea struck, and the man decided to make a bridge that would look like a web, but would be made of thick steel ropes and chains. The result was a hanging bridge.
So we see that the threads of a spider web, chains of bridge, strong lives of parachute all look the same. Before we go further, let me tell you that the silk which the spider uses to make the web is manufactured in its own abdominal glands only. The moment this liquid comes out of its stomach holes, with the air contact, it becomes hard enough for the spider to make its web.
Have you ever made a kite or flown a kite? You probably have, and you must have watched it while it is racing up, and then as though it had hit something in the air, begins to tumble down, only to go sailing up again, ever higher than before. After all, how did the man get an idea to fly the kite? Maybe people thought of making a kite after watching the way the yellow leaves of autumn fly swirling high and low along with the wind.
Kites gave an idea to make big complicated kites on which they can fly also. So these very kites turn into gliders. But why did they want to fly high in the sky? What gave them an idea? Probably the birds. If there were no birds, people would never ever have known about the wings and flying. So you see, the autumn leaves, birds, cobwebs inspired people to invent the kites, gliders, airplane, parachutes, etc.
Did you ever know that many animals and birds can actually warn us about the weather? For example, if a kitten sharpens its claws on the wall, it indicates that rain is coming. But if it rolls on its back with its paws in the air, the days will be warm and dry.
Let me tell you a story to make this point more clear. There was a geologist who had a very ordinary sheepdog. One day, he was sitting at his desk, busy working, and his baby daughter sleeping nearby in a pram, and the dog was dozing away in the corner. Everywhere there was peace and quiet. Suddenly, the dog leapt up and seized the baby by her nightdress, pulled her out of the pram, and rushed towards the door. The geologist got terrified and ran after the dog, holding his baby daughter and at the same time thinking of shooting this mad dog. Just then, the earth shook and the house collapsed. Suddenly, he realized that an earthquake had just started and how his loyal dog has saved his family. This is an actual incident happened in a Turkmenian city long ago. Of course, today we make use of a seismograph for the same purpose.
There are other animals also which give such indications, like 3 days before the earthquake, the snakes leave their holes and the pigeons their lofts. Even those tiny transparent jellyfish that look so helpless can tell us when a storm is coming. The sea may be calm. There may not be a single cloud in the sky, but swarms of jellyfish race for the shore to hide behind the rocks or cliffs. Suddenly, we find after 10 or 15 hours, the oceans begin to rage. The question is, how does the jellyfish feel the approach of a storm?
Actually, it has a special ear. This is a small ball filled with liquid and tiny stones. When the sound reaches the ear of the jellyfish, they touch the ball with the liquid and shake the stones. The stones then press on the nerves of the jellyfish and frightens it so very much that to escape this terrifying sound, the jellyfish rushes into the shallows. So people try to discover how the ear of the jellyfish is constructed so that they can also make an apparatus similar to that to predict storms. And they did get successful at it. And this is being used by the shipmen. It warns them 15 hours before the actual storm. Thus, the engineers learned from the jellyfish how to make this apparatus barocyclometer to save their ships.
So if you are a little curious and observe things around you, you too can invent something new. Let's go further and see how much you know about animals, and which all will give you a further insight too. Have you long marveled at the cat's green eyes? And do you know why they gleam in dark? Actually, inside the cat's eyes, there are many silvery crystals, just like tiny mirrors. And these mirrors collect the light that finds its way into the eyes and magnify it. That is why the cat can see at night. But daylight is too bright for the cat's eye. They have to protect themselves. If you take a look at the cat's eye in the daylight, you'll see that the pupils of the eyes are narrow slits. And they let in very little light, but it's enough for the cat to see because of the tiny mirrors which make the light stronger. So, the cat can see well in the daytime too, with such slits of eyes. It's not only the cats who have such eyes. The lizards and some types of sharks have eyes with pupils that change their shape.
Speaking and discovering about the eyes only, have you ever wondered how can the whirligig beetle spot things at the same time inside and outside water? If they spot a fish stealing up on them, they just jump out of water. And if they notice a bird getting interested in them, they quickly dive into the water. Actually, the whirligig beetles are able to see equally well in water and in the air, because beetles, each eye has divided itself into two halves. The lower half is under the water and on the lookout for fish, while the upper half is above the water and on the lookout for birds. So, in actual, the beetle has 4 eyes. On the other hand, frog does not see an object that is not moving. Even if a rag is moving, it is a food for the frog and must be caught.
Have you heard of a famous Spanish sport called bullfighting? Have you ever given it a thought what makes the bull so very angry to attack? It is certainly not the red cape. Even if the bullfighter had any other colored cloth, the bull will behave in the same manner. Because the simple truth is that the bulls are colorblind. Then what makes the bull charge? The answer is simple and straight. It is the movement of the cape, not the color of it, which agitates the bull. Similarly, we have a great many other small hunters like lizards, insects and small animals who notice their prey only when it moves. Isn't it interesting to know?
So next time when you go to the woods or for a long walk in the jungle, don't think you are alone. There are thousands of eyes which are watching you from under the grass, leaves or stalks, and every eye sees you differently. Get your field glasses and put them on and take a closer look at these creatures and learn as much as you can.
Oops! We almost forgot to talk about the fascinating toad. Did you know that they can be used as barometers? Interesting, isn't it? Because of their interesting skin, toads make a good weather forecasters. Some people keep them as barometers inside a glass jar containing a little water and a miniature ladder. Before dry and fine weather, the toad goes into the water, and if a rainy weather is likely, he climbs a ladder and sits on a small platform at the top and croaks joyfully. Furthermore, if you had lived in the Middle Ages and suffered from a fever, a toad would have been put in your bed, for it was believed that sleeping next to a toad cured fever once and for all. Sick houses were also cured by hanging a toad by one leg from the rafters of the stable, and many medicines were made too from the toads. Interesting, isn't it?
Did you know this amazing fact that some of the living animals make their own light? If you go rowing on the sea on a dark night, you may see a flash of light each time your oar enters the water. These flashes are caused by tiny animals which live in the sea just below the surface. They are simply the one-celled animals. Now the question arises, how do they make light? These creatures, like fireflies, produce a chemical which can be used to make a certain kind of light. But this light is not warm and also does not burn as a paraffin. So we must know that the light made by all the living things are cold, not as warm as sunlight or an electric light.
But there are some animals who do not make the light on their own. But there is this bacteria which lives in special pockets on the skin of these animals, which helps them to produce light. In Burma and Siam, where there are a lot of fireflies, make brilliant shows, for thousands of them gather on trees for a distance of 100 yards. And all of them flash together, and every few seconds the branches are outlined by the tiny points of light. Each one is from one beetle. Isn't it amazing how the nature continues to surprise us?
Talking of animals only, did you know how long ago the story of medicine began? The people of ancient Babylon believed that toothache was caused by a worm. They thought this worm lived in their teeth and gums and caused pain by sucking the blood of the tooth and shaking its root. So they would call a priest to drive out the demon worm.
Such beliefs about the causes of disease and their treatment were common among early men. Evidence shows that Stone Age people suffered from diseases like tuberculosis. It was discovered only when we dug up the earlier human bodies, believing as they used to that these diseases are caused by the evil spirits. Sometimes they even made small holes right through the patient's skull to let the evil spread out. It is remarkable that some of these patients have lived for many years after the operation.
Since man has always been in danger of attack by wild animals or other men, they have looked for ways to heal wounds while hunting or fighting. Nowadays, doctors study anatomy. This means that they must know all about the inside of the body. Now, the earliest knowledge of anatomy must have been gained in by cutting up animals for food and while tending to men's wounds.
As the time went by, we found that the Babylonian priests became more skilled in the use of medicine. Their treatment recipes were found inscribed on some of the clay tablets of their time.
Many important discoveries were made very early, like the bandage, which we take for granted today, were devised and used by the Egyptians first. They learned how to set the bones of broken legs and arms and used wooden splints to keep them in place until they were knit together again.
So it was more than 4,000 years ago. Man had begun to learn a little about the mysteries of his body with the help of course, the Mother Nature. But it took many centuries to give it a scientific approach. Have you ever heard of a beggar plant? If not, then let's know about it a little. You must be knowing that all the green plants can make food for themselves. Nearly all those that are not green must get food ready-made. We can call them the beggar plants. All the fungi are beggar plants. Some of them grow on living plants and get food from them. Others live on dead plants. Much of every plant is hidden, and the hidden part is made up of tiny threads that grow into the ground or in the wood of old logs or the tree trunks. These threads gather up food and water for it. There are hundreds of kinds of fungi or mushrooms. Some of them have very beautiful color too. But remember, only some mushrooms are good to eat, but some are deadly poison. It is never safe to eat a mushroom found growing wild unless an expert says that it is a good one.
Now let us go from beggar plants to mountains that smoke. Did you know that in many parts of the world there are mountains that smoke? At times, clouds of smoke rise from them, and this smoke can be a very dangerous sign. With a rumble and roar, red-hot rock may begin pouring out of the top of the mountain and may run down the sides of the mountain and bury villages and other surrounded areas. And the bits of rock which may shoot high into the air, which can really hurt people. Do you know that these kind of mountains are called volcanoes? The spelling goes Volcanoes. They get their name from Vulcan, the Roman god of fire, and the hot rock that pours out of the opening is called lava. And when a volcano sends out hot rock, we say that it is erupting, and no one can be sure that a volcano will erupt again, though it may have been quiet for many years.
Now let's once again go back to the animal kingdom and take a trip back to millions of years ago, when we could see a big animal walking along the edge of a pond, and we too could see the deep footprint in the mud there, where no other animal dared to walk along those footprints to spoil them. Rain also did not wash them away. The mud got covered by more mud. In time, the footprints were buried deep in the ground. The mud they were made in became solid rock. They have lasted, can you believe, for millions of years.
Do you know it is such footprints only are called fossil? Fossil is not only these kinds of footprints, but can be a rock of some plant or animals of long ago. If we did not have bothered to find about fossils, then we would not have known about the animals and plants or habitat that lived on the earth long ago. Anyway, we wanted to talk about the giants of long ago. Today the elephant may be the biggest living animal, but millions of years ago, in the age of reptiles, there were dinosaurs. The word dinosaur means terrible reptiles. There were various kinds of dinosaur like Tyrannosaurus, Brontosaurus and Triceratops.
Now let us know little bit about them. Tyrannosaurus was the meat eater, and this big fellow was 3 times as tall as a man. Just imagine how very big this giant would have been. It had strong jaws which were a yard long and very sharp teeth. Sharp claws helped it catch its prey. But many of the dinosaurs were plant eaters too. Some of these big plant eaters spent most of the time in the ponds. Because of the reason, they not only ate the plants which grew in the pot, but water also helped them to hold up their big bodies. And Brontosaurus was one of the biggest plant-eating dinosaur. This kind of a species was so big and heavy that perhaps it shook the ground when it walked about.
Continuing this topic of animals, there are many animals who just cannot stand cold weather. Just as we put on heavy clothes, stay in our houses with fire on to remain comfortable and cozy. Since animals cannot build fire to keep themselves warm, but some do find snug winter homes for themselves. For example, a frog buries itself in mud, a bear curls up in a hollow tree, and many other animals such as snakes, turtles, squirrels, and certain species of rats do the same. Do you know spending the winter time in this way is called what? Yes, it is called hibernating. The spelling goes Hibernating.
Whereas the birds are concerned, they travel to warmer regions for the winters, and traveling this way is called migrating. How can they find their way is though a great mystery. But then this is the reason we say nature is full of mysteries. The more we try to discover more riddles, we are able to solve.
Let me tell you something more interesting. Have you ever heard of butterfly migration? Actually, it has been known for centuries that many birds migrate from one part of the world to another, regularly year after year. However, it is a much recent discovery that some species of butterflies do the same sort of thing. The best known example of this is provided by the monarch butterfly of North America. In the summer, it is found all over United States, in southern Canada, and in the west and north of Alaska. These butterflies gather together in small parties in the autumn and begin to fly south. As they go, more butterflies join them until sometimes many thousands travel together. When they find the warm climate, they stop and they roost on in one group of trees. Very often it is actually found that they come to the same trees year after year. Interesting, isn't it?
You must have seen and played with cats very often. But let me tell you something about the catfish. They are called catfish because of their whiskers. And they are found practically all over the world except in the coldest regions. They live mostly in the fresh water, but sometimes in the sea too. However, the large, ugly, saltwater fish, sometimes called by the Britishers the wolf fish. The catfish are probably of about 2,000 different kinds. Their spines are saw-edged and sometimes poisonous, causing dangerous wounds. Their body never has ordinary scales. It is usually naked and smooth. Most catfish feed on the bottom of streams and lakes, using their whiskers to feel in the mud for worms and other creatures, and some eat up dead animals too. A few kinds grow to a very large size, whereas some remain very small, which are very often bought for an aquarium. Another interesting but amazing thing about them is the male fish very often carries eggs in his mouth for safety instead of leaving it at his place or in the nest.
Talking of fish, did you know that the sharks must swim all the time? Because unless a shark is in constant motion, it'll sink and drown. The water must pass constantly over the gills to allow the shark to take out the gases it needs for survival.
You must have seen a baboon in a zoo, or at least in a picture. Did you know that they can tear up their food into pieces by hand and can store it in their cheek pouches so that they can chew it and relish it whenever they want it? Though they are very noisy and they use these grunts, squeals and chatterings for communicating with one another. And they make use of their tails also to signal others. Baboons are very intelligent and can be trained. That is the reason ancient Egyptians not only worshipped them but had trained baboons to pick fruit for them. So don't you think it is only the chimpanzee who can be smart?
Talking of smartness, we should not forget to mention the name of dolphins. Though they are the members of the whale family and are therefore mammals. But these dolphins are very sociable creatures. They always or nearly always swim together in a group. They show great agility in the water and often play around the ships. Because of its over-friendliness towards man, the dolphin has been well known since ancient times. Today, dolphins are kept in an aquarium so that we can teach them to perform tricks and provide an entertainment to us. Besides this, dolphins do talk to each other using a range of sounds. Though the scientists are still trying to understand how do they communicate underwater and also to see if they can be used for carrying out tasks under the sea.
So you see, we should always be very inquisitive, otherwise the life will become very boring and dull. So never sit idle for a minute, be always on the move. Let me tell you another interesting fact, and this time let us talk about our tears. Can you guess why are human tears so salty? A theory has been put forward which may give us a clue. Researchers have recently discovered that many seagulls have tiny glands which release salty liquid into the corners of their eyes. Seabirds must remove salt from their bodies, and this is one way of doing so. Many parts of our bodies are related to similar organs in other creatures. Why should not our tear glands correspond to the salt glands of seabirds and so produce salty tears?
What did the egg say? Well, didn't you hear him say anything? The egg said something. You mean you didn't know that eggs can talk to one another? Strange. The discovery that eggs communicate by clicking has just been made at the Cambridge University. Scientists found that eggs in a clutch click hatch faster than single eggs, and they all hatch together. A clock hastens the hatching of fertile eggs. So, poultry farmers might replace mother hen with an alarm clock. Isn't it a strange discovery?
How would you like a chemical dinner? Volunteers in California have lived without ill effect for 19 weeks on a diet of pure chemicals dissolved in water. Astronauts could eat chemical food, for it is compact and easily stored, and although it is not tasty at all, a chemical diet could probably sustain human for long periods. Rats have already lived a normal lifetime on it, but who would want to be a rat? Talking of eating, let me tell you about the teeth that really chatter. Dental scientists have devised a tooth that talks. It looks like an ordinary tooth but contains 6 tiny radio transmitters. As the tooth chews food in the mouth, it broadcasts information about the pressures acting on its surface. The information would enable researchers to understand how the teeth are to be protected from the damage when they crunch food. Just see how much man has progressed. Still, this is not the end. There is so very much still left for us to learn and to discover.
Let me tell you something about the strange but interesting battle dog. I bet you haven't read about them. The Assyrians, whose mighty empire in Asia was in its peak between 2,000 and 3,000 years ago, were fierce and war-loving people. Perhaps it was because of this they thought so highly of the huge, ferocious dogs that they took into battle to frighten and attack the enemy. Before the battle, the dogs were starved for several days to make them specially savage. They were actually the sheepdogs who came from the empire called Molossus, which now is in Greece. Earlier, they were used for hunting, but later on they began to be used as war dogs. To feed these dogs, the 4 villages were exempted from paying taxes. Because of their braveness, these magnificent creatures became the favorites at the court of Cyrus, king of Persia, and Alexander the Great. Let me tell you that they are the ancestors of our mastiff dogs. Is it not interesting, since they are so different from our docile and fun-loving pet dogs?
How sociable are animals? Are they happier alone or in groups? And how do creatures of one species communicate with those of another? Recent work in United States has revealed more about these problems of animal behavior. One researcher has studied the behavior of rats in a laboratory. For over a period, he found that rats taken away from companions and put in a cage alone become very irritable and unfriendly. Animals unhappy with their surroundings produce more of a certain chemicals which distress them more because of loneliness or by overcrowding or even by cold condition. Another American scientist has observed that how the elk and the moose communicate with each other in their natural surrounding, and they do so with a sign language. Another interesting fact, which is when 2 animals meet at close quarters, they don't even look at each other. They show friendly intentions by taking small, quick steps. So, who says only we need friends? Our animal friends need too.
Well, you have been listening to Behavior of Animals. Well, this is something about the strange behavior of a wallpaper. An inventor has designed a wallpaper that changes color to music. The wallpaper is a set of colored lights fixed behind a cloudy glass. Musical notes from a tape recorder switch on the lights, but notes of a certain pitch bring on other colors, so the color of the wallpaper changes.
Have you seen a red sky at night and have been wondering what is causing that? The colors we see in the sky at sunset are caused by the cocktails in the air. As the sun sinks in the west, its rays pass through thick layers of air near the Earth's surface. When the air is dry, billions of dust granules scatter the light sideways. White light is composed of many colors, but red and orange are scattered much less than others. So these are the colors that we see. A beautiful red and orange sky tells us that dry air lies to the west, and this usually brings fine weather. But do you know, cocktails in the air are not always pleasant. Smog reduces visibility and can lead to accidents. It is harmful to our lungs too. It is strange but true.
Well, how about sailing in sunshine? A boat driven by sunshine has been invented by an American scientist. This craft is powered by 2 cells of solar energy, one mounted on the bows and one mounted on the hull. The solar cell changes sunlight into electricity. Sunlight shining on the boundary between two special metals produces an electric current. The electricity is stored in a battery and is then used to drive a motor, which rotates the propeller. On a sunny day, the solar cells produce enough electricity to move the boat at 5 miles per hour. It is these very solar cells that are used to provide electricity for spacecrafts and satellites in orbit around the Earth.
Have you ever seen a rabbit rubbing his chin and also wondered as to why do rabbits rub their chins? Let me give you an answer. Just as birds' song sometimes warn other birds to keep their distance, chin rubbing by rabbits serves the same purpose. Australian scientists have discovered a gland under the rabbit's chin which produces a special substance. Traces of this substance on posts and earth mounds where a rabbit has rubbed its chin warn other rabbits that the territory is already occupied. Hares have a similar gland, but it is not so well developed as in the rabbit.
Now, let us talk about the sleeping habits of elephants. Did you know that an elephant can sleep standing up? They usually sleep about 4.5 hours at night, lying down, and 20 minutes standing up. Amazing habits. An elephant apparently likes to sleep either on its right side or on its left side, but not on its back, and will often roll up its trunk into a spiral when it is asleep. So remember these things if you keep a pet elephant.
Now let me ask you to do something interesting on your own. We'll try and boil the water in a paper bag. Yes, you heard me right. You may think it can't be boiled in a paper bag, but it is quite easily done. Let me tell you how. So, let's get going. First, find some strong metal wire and bend it round into a ring 2 or 3 inches across. Leave enough wire at the ends to form a handle on the ring. Cut a circle about twice as big as the ring out of strong paper. Then push the paper into the ring to form a cup with a flat bottom. Pour a few spoonfuls of water into the cup. Put a glove on to protect your hand and hold the paper cup by the wire handle so that it is just above a lighted candle. The water you'll discover will boil soon. Because of the water, the cup will not catch fire even if the flame touches it. So let's see. Can you do it? If you can't, take help, but don't give up. That's all for today. These facts have been brought to you by Kalyani Educational Rhythms. Until then.